This podfic contains content that may be disturbing for some viewers, including mentions of violence, guns, and physical and emotional abuse. Please check out the complete list of content warnings in the description, and proceed with caution if you are sensitive to these topics.
Hello my lovely little gemstones, it's Saphira, and today I'll be reading When the Chips Are Down by Whiskey with Patron. Chapter 54. Here we go. The light in the room beyond the door was dim, which Janus was eternally grateful for. The fluorescent lights in the hallway were already too much for him. Sitting at the desk in the middle of the room was Ares Justice, head lowered and hidden by his arms. Pang of concern urged Janus forward. Ares, are you all right? Ares slowly lifted his head, his tired gaze fixed on Remy and Price. 2 new bodyguards, he rasped. The 3 of them can stay out of the room if you'd like, Janus offered. If they didn't have to be in Ares' direct vicinity, it would be easier for Remy or Price to sneak away and find Patton. Ares gave a sharp nod. Janus turned to the other 3. DW, please guard the door, he said. He kept his voice softer when speaking to her, knowing full well that she hated being in this place, much less in the presence of Ares Justice. And make sure those 2 don't touch anything. DW hesitated. Are you sure? She asked. She seemed reluctant to leave Janus alone with Ares. We'll be fine, Janus said. She still seemed uncertain, but she ushered Remy and Price out of the room. With one last concerned look at Janus, she shut the door. Janus stepped forward and lowered himself into the chair on the other side of Ares' desk. Where's your brother? Ares scoffed. I didn't kill him, if that's what you're asking. He ground his teeth to hide a wince, something Janus wouldn't have noticed if he hadn't been around Ares as much as he was. Ares didn't raise his head any higher than it already was. Janus raised a brow. Did you have a flare? He asked quietly. Ares grimaced. No, but I feel like I might, he admitted through gritted teeth. Did you invite him here? The hell do you think? Ares spat. There wasn't nearly as much venom behind his words as there normally would have been. Why did you ask him to come here? He could have killed you. But I'm still fucking alive, Chimera. He's a little bitch. He has kids now. The fucker wouldn't hurt a goddamn fucking butterfly. Language, dear. I know you're angry, but do try to keep things civil, why don't you? Shut the fuck up. Why on earth would you ask him to come here? Were you planning on killing him? Ares scoffed. Fuck no. I just wanted to make him a deal. Janus hadn't been expecting to hear that. A deal, he repeated. What kind of deal? Ares gave a casual shrug. Gave him a couple options. He's making a decision. Now, I thought I said I didn't want to talk to you. Get out of my place, or I'll call security and force you out. We both know you wouldn't do that. Ares growled, but he didn't deny it. He clenched his fists, arms still folded on the table. You're a goddamn nuisance. I'm well aware. Janus folded his arms in his lap to keep them still. Now, what options did you offer your brother? Ares didn't answer right away. His gaze traveled everywhere but Janus's face as he picked at the tape on his hands. Ares, what did you do? Janus hissed. I offered to leave his family alone if he rejoins Wrath, Ares said finally. Janus stayed silent as he let that sink in. He flexed his fingers in his gloves and took a deep breath. You did what? Janus asked, his voice low. Well, I didn't want to fucking kill him, Ares snapped. And he won't let me mentor one of his kids to take the business when I'm gone. This isn't even your business. Why are you so concerned about it? Because if he joins you, that will affect my business, Janus said, along with every other business in the underground. Hitmen will lose jobs because people will only use his services. His leadership will create a huge scandal because people will find out that he's your brother and he killed his father, and the workers in Wrath will revolt as soon as he takes the business. Also, do you really think he would keep doing things the same way they've always been done around here? He could shut down Wrath, leaving all of your employees out of a job. Or maybe he'll make things even worse and start taking workers from other organizations. He He could either make the entire underground economy collapse, or end up running a monopoly of a crime empire because no one will dare go against him. There are two extremes here, and neither of them are good.
Well, what did you want me to do? Ares said, voice slowly raising in volume. I don't have a lot of options here.
You could have done anything but that, Janus answered. He kept his voice quieter, hoping that Ares would follow suit and lower his voice.
I'm doing what I have to, Ares snarled. Now, I suggest you get the fuck out of my office before I...
The lamp on the desk flickered and went out. Janus flinched as Ares shouted a curse to the darkness. Ares clicked the switch on the lamp multiple times, but the light didn't come back on. Janus sighed. Dear, did you forget to replace your light bulb? Ares growled. Hang on. Janus heard footsteps walk around him to the door. Ares fumbled for the doorknob. The door swung open, but the room remained dark. Janus could just barely see the outline of DW and Price standing in the hallway. Remy was nowhere to be found.
Another fucking power outage?
Ares swore.
You don't have something to do with this, do you?
Absolutely not.
Funny, because the last time this happened was yesterday when we were talking.
The usual venom crept back into his voice.
Just what the hell are you planning, you fucking snake?
Nothing, dear. I'm sure these blackouts are a coincidence that just happens to coincide with the times that I visit you, Janus said. There's absolutely nothing suspicious about that. Ares took a deep breath.
You kidnapped those kids from our warehouse, he said,
his voice deadly quiet. Correction. You kidnapped them. We rescued them. Do try to keep up, darling.
You said you were going to stay out of my business.
Oh, you know I'm a liar.
Fuck you.
That's Logan's job, not yours. Ares left the room. He pushed past Price and DW, who had both stayed silent through the exchange, possibly due to fear. Ares didn't seem to notice that Remy was missing. Janus stood and walked after him, waving for DW and Price to follow suit. They fell into step behind Janus. Justice, where are you going?
I'm going to figure out what the hell you're doing, Ares snapped.
Well, I'm coming with you, Janus said. You wouldn't want to be alone in the dark, would you?
Fuck you,
Ares spat, but he didn't try to protest to Janus's company. DW quickened her pace until she caught up to Janus. The two of them exchanged a mildly worried glance. They both hoped Remy could reach Patton and get him out of this building before Ares caught him. As soon as the lights went out, Remy turned to Price. I'll go find him, he whispered. Price gave a sharp nod. Remy crept away towards the door, digging his phone out of his pocket along the way. He ducked out of the room and hurried down the hallway, keeping his footsteps light. It was hard to see in the darkness. He hoped no one would be able to spot him, but just in case, he was already racking his brain for a cover story. He dared to unlock his phone, the dim light illuminating the hallway for a moment before he lowered the brightness. Nothing from Andy quite yet. A text popped on screen. He breathed a quiet sigh of relief and scanned the words. Hey, Rem. I found Patton's location, but I'm starting to second-guess this. Someone contacted me, and we've got another plan. You should probably get out of there in case things go south. Remy raised a brow. Who else had contacted Andy, and why did she come up with a new plan without telling everyone else? He quickly tapped out a response. I don't think I can get out of here right now, so can you please send me Patton's location quick and then tell me your new plan? He tiptoed down the hall, phone in hand. The elevator doors stood in front of him, but a T in the hallway provided him with a choice. He hesitated before ducking down the left hall. He didn't really know what Andy's plan was, but he desperately hoped she knew what she was doing. Well, she always knew what she was doing, but he hoped she knew what she was getting the rest of them into. Another message popped up. He's in room 16H. Should be in the hallway you're in right now. Go find him, and I'll explain. Remy typed a quick thanks and pocketed his phone. He could hardly see the doors that lined the hall, but he could just make out the white lettering that labeled each one. He skidded to a stop when he spotted a door that read 16H. A glance down the hall confirmed that he was alone. He hesitated, but he gently knocked on the door. A heavy sigh met his ears through the door. What do you want, Ares? A familiar voice said. The door opened just a crack. Someone looked out at Remy, brown eyes blinking in confusion. Then the door opened the rest of the way. Someone stepped out, sliding a pair of round glasses onto their face. Remy? Patton whispered. Remy nudged the door open and gently brushed past Patton to go into the room beyond. He didn't like being so exposed and alone in the dark hallway of this place. The light from the window across the room provided enough light for Remy to see. The room looked like a bedroom that hadn't been lived in for years. A bed sat against the wall to the left, neatly made with the pillows leaning against the headboard. The dresser next to it was covered with a thin film of dust. The only sign that anyone had been here before was an orange sleeve poking out of a slightly open drawer. Remy turned to Patton and gave him a brief once-over. The sleeves of Patton's cute cat sweater hung over his hands, but he'd rolled up one of them so he could twiddle with a necklace that hung over his collar. He looked nothing like the dangerous assassin Remy had seen just earlier that morning. He looked shocked and scared and a little worried. Remy was relieved to see that there didn't seem to be any injuries or wounds on him. Patton caught his arm. "Remy, what are you doing here?" he whispered, voice high and frantic. "You have to leave. This isn't safe. You're going to get killed. You can't be here. You have to go. Now." "No," Remy said firmly. He took Patton's hand and unwrapped his fingers from around Remy's arm. Remy laced his fingers with Patton's and looked him dead in the eye. "I'm not leaving unless we're both leaving. I'm not going without you." Patton shook his head, distress written on every inch of his face. "Rem, please," he begged, voice thick with emotion. "Someone's going to kill you. Then come with me." I can't," Patton said. Tears gleamed in his eyes. He looked on the verge of panic. I have to make things right. I have to make up for the things I've done. I can't go. If someone sees you here, they're going to kill you. Please, Remy, just leave." "I don't care," Remy insisted, growing more and more desperate. He needed Patton to come with him. "I'm not leaving until you agree to come with me, and that's final." Patton sniffled. "You're too stubborn for your own good," he muttered. Remy forced a small grin onto his face. "That's part of my charm." That earned a tiny laugh from Patton. One hand still clutching Remy's in a vice grip, he lifted his glasses with the other hand to wipe at his tears. "Rem, please, you're going to die here. Not if you leave with me." Patton kept shaking his head. "Please, I can't have another death on my conscience, least of all yours." "Then let's get out of here. Look, the Chimeras came up with a plan. Logan and Andy are helping too. We're going to get you out of here." Patton blinked. "Logan?" "Yeah, I know, right? I think he's dating Janus Chimera. It's fucking weird." Patton let out another small giggle. "Oh my goodness. I should have known. They're so similar. They would absolutely get along." "Anyway," Remy continued, squeezing Patton's hand a bit tighter, "are we getting out of here or what?" A grimace made its way onto Patton's face. Remy kept his grip on Patton's hand tight. There was no way he was letting go until Patton agreed to come with him. But just by looking in Patton's eyes, Remy could tell that he was determined to stay here, no matter how much it would hurt both of them. Tears still glimmered behind his glasses, and he nervously fidgeted with the necklace at his throat. And Remy realized just how scared Patton was. Not scared for himself, but for Remy, and what Wrath would do to him if they found out he snuck in. Remy made a mental note to rethink his habit of sneaking into headquarters of dangerous gangs. Remy had to do something to convince Patton to leave. He may have thought giving himself up would solve everything, but that didn't change the fact that Remy loved him, and he wasn't going to let Patton stay here forever. Remy racked his brain for something, anything he could say that might get Patton to change his mind about being here. But Remy was sure that nothing short of the well-being of his kids would be enough to convince him otherwise. Remy internally debated about bringing that up. But Patton surely would have thought of his children already. That was likely the first thing he considered when he made this choice. Remy had to do something, so he did the only thing he could think of. Letting go of Patton's hand to take him by the shoulders, Remy stood up on his tiptoes and leaned in. Before he could really give some thought to what he was doing, he pressed his lips to Patton's. The kiss was much softer, more hesitant than Remy had expected. Then again, he'd only just realized that he loved Patton this way, so he hadn't had time to imagine it much. It took Remy a moment to realize that the hesitance was coming from himself, which was strange because he was Remy. He was confident and cocky, and this uncertainty was very odd to bear. But God, he was kissing Patton, and Patton wasn't doing anything about it, and what if he just did the wrong thing? Patton's hands came to rest on Remy's waist, and all that hesitance flew out the window. Remy pulled Patton in closer, suddenly desperate to hold him as if Patton would disappear if Remy ever let go. He clutched Patton's shoulders tight and kissed him harder, silently, desperately pleading for Patton to just listen to Remy, because Remy was not going to leave this dangerous hellhole without him. Patton tightened his grip on Remy's hips, like he was just as scared to let go as Remy was. They finally pulled apart and locked eyes, both a little breathless. Remy's face heated up as it registered in his head that he just kissed Patton, and Patton had kissed him back. I'm not leaving without you, Remy said, voice an octave higher than usual. Patton swallowed, gaze flitting over Remy's face. Remy waited for a response, and just as Patton opened his mouth to give one, someone knocked on the door. They both froze like deer in headlights. Remy didn't know who was at the door, but he didn't want to find out. Luckily, Patton seemed to share the sentiment. He grabbed Remy's arm and pulled him over to the closet rather unceremoniously. Remy stumbled after him, a little taken aback. Patton opened the closet. "Hide," he said. Remy wanted to protest, but the look in Patton's eyes radiated fear, and Remy decided that he did not want to be in view when the person outside came into the room. He ducked into the near-empty closet, and Patton slid the doors shut. Remy held his breath as he heard Patton's footsteps make their way to the door. He tried to focus on the problem at hand. The problem being that he was stuck in a closet and could easily be found by whoever was going to come in. But his stupid gay brain couldn't stop thinking about how soft Patton's lips had felt against his own. Goodness, how had he not realized he loved Patton earlier? His thoughts were interrupted when he heard the door to the room open. "Prometheus," said a raspy voice, and it took Remy a moment to recognize it as Ares Justice. "What do you want, Ares?" Patton asked. There was a fierce hardness to his voice that hadn't been there before, but it was still a little shaky and breathless. Remy hoped Justice didn't notice. "Nothing, darling," said another voice that Remy immediately recognized as Janus Chimera. "Your dearest brother here is convinced that I have something to do with this strange blackout. He thought he would come check on you to make sure you're okay." "You literally admitted that you had something to do with it," Ares snapped. Chimera gave an exaggerated gasp. "Me? Cause something like this? Ares, dear, are you sure? I don't recall saying that. Are you sure you didn't imagine it in the middle of a coughing fit?" "Shut up, Chimera." "Stay calm, darling. You wouldn't want to lose your breath now, would you?" Justice growled something under his breath that Remy couldn't hear. The anger in his voice sent a chill up Remy's spine. He wanted nothing more than to grab Patton's hand and run as far away from this place as possible, but it would be hard to do that with Ares Justice himself blocking the door. Remy peeked out through the slight gap in the closet door. He caught a glimpse of Justice before his gaze settled on Mr. Chimera, who stood in the room with his back straight and head high, like he was the leader of this gang instead of Justice. DW and Price both stood behind him. Price scanned the room. Her eyes flitted across the closet. She did a double take, and her eyes widened when she saw Remy through the crack in the door. Price gently nudged DW's side with her elbow. She gave the slightest of nods to the closet. DW followed her gaze. A look of pure exasperation came over her face, and she rolled her eyes. Remy hoped she wouldn't be too mad once this whole fiasco was over. Justice gave a heavy sigh. "Prometheus, I came down here because this asshole is doing something, and because I don't know what it is, I wanted to make sure that it had nothing to do with you. But, as long as I'm here, have you made a decision yet?" "Rejoining Wrath's Blade would be a bad decision, Patton," Chimera said before Patton could even speak. "I mean, unless you have some sort of ulterior motive here. According to your letter, I thought you would be running from Wrath, not leaping into their arms. Tell me, was this all an elaborate ruse to get in here just so you could kill Ares? If so, that's quite devious, even for you." Patton's eyes widened. "What? No, that's not what I'm here to do." "Then what are you here to do?" "I'm here to make things right," Patton said firmly. "By joining the gang whose leader you once killed?" Mr. Chimera scoffed. "Listen, dear, DW and I have had to deal with your children for the past 3 days. 4 if you include today, and quite frankly, I would love for you to take them back. I have grown attached to them, and for their own well-being, I would like it if you didn't remain off the grid. Thank you very much." "I don't have many other options," Patton said. "Chimera, this isn't your problem," Justice snapped. "It became my problem the moment Patton sent his children to my bank. Ares, this situation does not only affect you and Wrath. It will affect everyone. Patton, you really need to think about this. Remy glanced down at his phone. Hadn't Andy said she was going to explain about this new plan she came up with? If she had a new plan, now would be the perfect time to execute it. A message popped up on his screen. Thinking it was Andy, he quickly skimmed the words, but instead it was the nerd, Logan, that is. Salutations, Remy. It appears some things have gone a little haywire. Someone is blocking my signal to Janus's phone and preventing me from contacting him. I was able to find a loophole into your phone because yours is not nearly guarded as well. Oddly enough, your friend Anxiety isn't answering my messages either, so it's possible that she has been blocked off as well. Be on your guard and get out of that place as soon as possible. Remy raised a brow in skepticism. No one could block Andy from anything. If she wanted to get into something's electronic system, she could and would get in no matter what. That left only one explanation. Andy herself was blocking Logan from any system inside Wrath. Remy glanced out of the room, waiting for Patton to say something, to make a decision already. He didn't know what the hell Andy was doing, but he hoped she would finish doing it soon. He wouldn't be able to forgive himself if he left this place without Patton. Patton straightened his back. Aries, he said, voice a little nervous and shaky, but confident nonetheless. I would like to go home to my kiddos, and I don't want Wrath to follow me. Everyone else was silent for one long moment before Justice spoke again. Is that really what you're deciding on? Patton gave a sharp nod. Yes. Justice sighed again, chest rattling painfully with his breath. Remy watched through the door as Justice reached into the pocket of his jeans and pulled out a phone. The entire room waited as he dialed a number and held the phone up to his ear. Security, he said. I would like you to come up to the room 16H. I would like all of the Chimeras out of my house and confiscate the key card that Janus Chimera has on him. Take Poison Dart down to the basement. We'll deal with him later. What? Janus Chimera squeaked. Aries, no. I don't know what the hell you're going to do, but your security guards aren't putting their grimy fucking hands anywhere on Janus, DW interrupted, stepping forward for the first time during this exchange. We'll leave on our own goddamn terms. Remy tensed. He could already hear a team of security guards marching their way down the hallway. He was not looking forward to being found out. Price caught Remy's gaze again. She motioned to the door with her head, silently suggesting that she and him make a mad dash for the exit. He lightly shook his head. There was no way they could get out of this place without being seen. Aries lowered his phone just as security guards began to pour into the room. There weren't many, only about 10 or so, but Remy knew he'd never be able to fight his way through them. They shut the door behind them, trapping everyone in the room with them and giving no one a chance to run. Hey! Price yelped as two people grabbed her arms. Careful, buddy. If you mess up my hair, I swear I'll... 4 guards went for DW and Mr. Chimera. DW shrugged off the 2 that went to grab her with a disgusted sneer. They backed off, exchanging mildly scared glances with each other. Janus simply held up a hand to stop the other 2 guards in their tracks. They retracted their hands, but flanked him on either side instead, ready to lead him out of the building. 2 other guards grabbed Patton. To Remy's surprise, he didn't even struggle. He just let them grab him, head still held high as if he wasn't about to be imprisoned in the basement and possibly tortured to death. The closet was flung open. Boss, I think we got a rat, a guard said. Remy blinked through his sunglasses at the security guard in front of him. He turned his gaze to Aries Justice across the room, who scowled at the sight of Remy. Take him to the basement, Justice ordered. Aries, no, Mr. Chimera protested. He stepped forward, but one guard placed a hand on his chest and pushed him back. He's coming with us. Sorry, Chimera, but you have no say what I do with rats in my building. 2 people grabbed Remy and dragged him out of the closet. They manhandled him over to where Patton stood. He struggled as hard as he could, but these security guards must have been on steroids or something, because no matter what he did, he couldn't get free. Aries, please think about this, Mr. Chimera pleaded as the guards guided them to the door. I made up my mind, Chimera, Justice said. Goodbye. The lights flickered back on for just a moment. Everyone paused to look up, but the guards got over their surprise quick. The ones holding Price reached the door and went to open it. Boss? What? Aries snapped. The door won't open. Justice pushed his way to the door. He tried to turn the knob, but it wouldn't open. He pressed his hand against the scanner next to the door. Nothing happened. Justice whirled around to face Mr. Chimera. What the hell did you do, you fucking snake? I promise this was not my doing. Mr. Chimera said. I'm telling the truth this time. The lights flickered again. Justice narrowed his eyes. His gaze landed on a blinking red light in the corner of the room. A security camera. Who the hell are you? He asked, question clearly directed at whoever was watching them through the hacked camera. As if in response, his phone rang. Chapter 55. Did we fix everything? Diana paced back and forth in Janus's office, phone in hand. She and Virgil had gone there since Logan was still working in the staff room, and Emil Picani was bustling about trying to keep things under control. It seemed like a nice, private place for Diana to make her phone call. The only problem was that she couldn't seem to work up the courage to actually do it. What if he doesn't want to talk to me? She wondered aloud as she paced. Virgil shrugged from where he lay half inside the pillow fort. I mean, he probably will. He's never met us before. He'd probably be happy to hear from you. Your family. But what if he's not? Diana fidgeted with the necklace at her throat. What if he doesn't want anything to do with me because Mom cut him off? I just don't know. You should probably make a decision soon, Virgil reminded her. That anxiety person is waiting on us. I know, Diana groaned. I don't know what to say. Be straightforward with it. Just say, hey, I'm your niece, and I heard you need someone to take over your business when you're gone. I'm available for the position. Let Patton go, and I'll come on over. Diana paused in her pacing. She looked down at her phone. Virgil wasn't great at gauging emotion, but the look on her face was one that was easily recognizable to him. She was anxious. Virgil sat up. You don't have to do this, he said, hoping to alleviate some of her anxiety. No, I want to. I really, really want to. She heaved a sigh. I don't know what I should say. Say whatever you think will convince him. Diana stared at her phone screen. After a moment's consideration, she set her jaw and looked up at Virgil, eyes shining with determination. I'll let anxiety know I'm ready. Andy frantically flicked through the cameras inside Rathspace. She and Logan hadn't planned for Ares Justice to leave his office and go find Patton. Now Remy was hiding in a closet, Janus Chimera was arguing with Ares Justice, and Andy had no idea what to do about it. Her phone screen lit up with a notification. She opened it. A message was on her screen from Justice's niece, telling Andy she was ready to go. Fucking finally. Andy sent back a quick message, saying, I'll tell you when to call. Give me a few. And then turned back to her laptop. She sneaked into Logan's phone and cut off his signal to Janus's phone before doing the same to his computer. She didn't need him interfering with her business. Patton watched as Ares pulled his phone out of his pocket. He glanced at the screen. He shot a glance at the security camera in the room. What are you playing at? He hissed. The lights flickered again. Patton exchanged a mildly confused glance with Remy, who just shrugged. Ares' phone kept ringing. The lights blinked on and off. Some of the blinks were longer than others, and Patton realized with a start that it was Morse code. He focused on the flashing lights, trying to decode what they were saying. Answer her. Patton furrowed his brow. Only one person would be impulsive and skilled enough to hack into Wrath and send a message through Morse code. This must have been Andy. But if Andy was the one hacking the lights, then who was calling Ares? Ares looked down at his still ringing phone. With another disdainful look at the camera, he pressed the accept button and put it on speakerphone. Hello? Hi? Said a timid voice, and Patton's breath caught in his throat. Was that Diana? His niece? How in the world had she gotten Ares' phone number? And why was she calling it? Is this Mr. Ares Justice? She asked. Who wants to know? Ares growled. The person on the other line cleared her throat. Mr. Justice, my name is Diana Short, she said, confirming Patton's suspicions. I'm your niece. Ares blinked. He lowered his phone. He turned to look at Patton, silently asking if he knew what this was about. Patton shook his head and shrugged. He had no idea why Diana was calling. Patton didn't even think Diana knew she had another uncle. He half wanted to call out to her and tell her to hang up, but part of him was curious about what she wanted. Ares swallowed and looked back down at his phone. How did you get this number? He asked, his voice quieter than usual. Well, I kind of promised I wouldn't tell you, but it's okay. I'm going to fix everything. I hope.
Why are you calling me?
I heard that you kidnapped my uncle. Well, my other uncle, Patton. And my cousins kind of need him back because he's their dad. So I was thinking that since you need someone to help you out with your whole crime business thing, maybe I could join you. But only if you let Patton go. Please.
No! Patton blurted. Diana, don't! He didn't get to finish his sentence. One of the guards holding him smacked their hand over his mouth. He began to struggle against them, but it was no use. They were too strong. He couldn't let Diana throw away her life just to save him.
Uncle Pat,
Diana's voice said.
Hello. It's nice to hear you. I just wanted to... Oh, hold on.
Muffled voices came through the speaker, followed by a slight rustling. Dad? A new voice said. A voice that Patton recognized. Panic jolted through his veins. He pried the guard's hand off of his mouth. Virgil! He shouted. Dad, Virgil said, sniffling. He sounded near tears, and the anguish in his voice was almost enough to make Patton sob. He hated hearing his kiddos cry. Virgil, what are you doing? Janus Chimera yelled. This is dangerous! Dad, are you okay? Virgil asked, ignoring Janus. Patton opened his mouth to speak, but the guard holding him clamped their hand over his face before he could utter a word. Patton grit his teeth in annoyance. He jabbed his elbow back, hitting the security guard square in the chest. Their grip loosened. Patton wriggled out of their hold and shoved them away. Let me talk to my fucking son! Patton snapped. Both guards that were holding him backed away, shocked confusion written on their faces. Patton rushed forward and grabbed Ares' phone, earning an annoyed, "Hey!" from his brother.
Virgil, please hang up, Patton begged. This is dangerous. I don't know how the two of you found this number, but you can't get yourselves involved.
Dad, we're trying to help, Virgil said, voice ringing with desperation. I can't lose you.
But I can't lose you, Patton protested. And I don't want to explain to Demeter that her daughter got caught up in her uncle's crime empire. Virgil, Diana, please hang up now. I love you both, and I don't want you hurt.
Well, I don't want you hurt, Virgil shouted. And Patton had never heard Virgil so much as raise his voice before. And what surprised him more was that Virgil didn't get anxious and try to apologize for his outburst. And goodness, that made Patton feel so incredibly proud of Virgil in that moment. He had to physically hold back tears. Ares held out a hand. My phone, he said. And just from the anger in his voice, Patton knew it wasn't a request. It was an order. Patton hesitated. I love you, Virgil, he said quickly, before handing the phone back to his brother. He heard Virgil's shouts of protest before Ares growled into the phone. Put Diana back on the line. Virgil's voice stopped. There was silence on the other line before Diana's voice piped up again. Hello? She sounded much more nervous than she had before. Why on earth would you want to join me? Ares asked. Diana heaved a sigh through the phone.
I'm not sure if you know, but my mom has been keeping me from seeing my family. I know I might just sound like some kind of entitled teenager or something, but I can't handle her anymore. And maybe it's just spite, or a burst of teenage rebellion, but I want to find my family. She doesn't even know that I've visited Patton before. She might actually lock me up if she knew I was doing things that I want to do. Her voice trembled a little as she spoke. I'm scared to tell her that anything's happened, and I've already dug myself a hole I can't get out of. If I'd known you existed, I would have called you years ago. I've been thinking about joining other gangs, just for a way out, but now I want to join you. I want to know my family.
Ares stared at his phone, mouth hanging open a little in shock. Patton felt as surprised as he looked. He knew Demeter was controlling, but he had no idea she was bad enough that Diana was scared to tell her mother when she was in trouble. Oddly enough, the shakiness and fear in Diana's voice reminded him a little of Virgil when Patton had first adopted him. Ares swallowed. He opened his mouth to respond, but instead of words, what came out of his mouth was a cough. His eyes widened as if he was surprised at himself. Realization, fear, and pain all flashed across his face in quick succession as another cough tore itself from his throat. Once the coughing started, it couldn't seem to stop. Ares covered his mouth with one hand and doubled over as he hacked. The phone in his other hand clattered to the floor. Patton stepped forward hesitantly, unsure of what to do, but concerned nonetheless. Ares, are you okay? What's happening? Ares couldn't seem to force out a single word through his coughing fit. He grimaced and covered his mouth with both hands. To Patton's surprise, Janus began struggling against the security guards holding him. "Let me go, you morons!" They did. Janus darted forward just in time to catch Ares as he collapsed. Ares curled in on himself as Janus circled his arms around Ares. With more gentleness than Patton had ever seen from him, Janus lowered himself and Ares to the ground, allowing Ares to lean his full weight on Janus. He turned to glare at the security camera in the room. "Open the door," he ordered. The lock clicked immediately. Janus turned his glower to the guards in the room. "Someone get him some water. One of you go up to his flat and grab the pill bottle on his bedside table. Don't make me tell you twice." 2 of the guards scrambled out of the room. Janus rubbed circles into Ares' back. It didn't seem to be helping much, but Ares leaned more on Janus' shoulder as he coughed. Patton winced in sympathy at the painful grating sound. "Why the hell didn't you take your meds, you fucking idiot?" Janus snapped, although he didn't actually seem angry. "Tell me you at least have your inhaler." Ares lightly shook his head, and Janus huffed. "Absolute moron. I don't know why I still put up with you." Ares' only response was another round of coughing. The guards around the room all exchanged surprised looks with one another, as if they had no idea what was going on. Every time they stared at Ares, Janus glared back until they looked away. Patton looked at Remy, then at Price. They both shrugged, looking just as confused as Patton felt. DW's face remained neutral. However, a spike of fear flashed across her face when her gaze slid across Patton. He tried to ignore the guilt that crashed over him when he noticed that. The 2 security guards rushed back into the room, one with a glass of water and the other with an orange pill bottle. They both approached Ares and Janus a little hesitantly. The guard holding the medicine held up something in their other hand. "I also brought this. I didn't know if you needed it." Janus breathed a sigh of relief and reached out for it. "Thank you." He took the pill bottle and the other thing, which turned out to be an inhaler, in one hand. He dropped the inhaler into Ares' hands. "Use your medicine, idiot," he snapped. Ares shot him a glare, but he uncapped the inhaler and brought it to his lips as he tried to stifle his coughing long enough to breathe in. He managed to take a couple puffs of the inhaler. His coughing died down enough to let him breathe. Janus shoved the bottle of pills into his hands. "Here." Ares reluctantly took the bottle as Janus reached out for the glass of water. Ares tossed a pill into his mouth and managed to choke down some water. He lowered the glass in the pill bottle, chest heaving. Patton took a hesitant step forward and picked up Ares' phone. "Virgil, Diana?" he said quietly. "Dad?" Virgil said. "What just happened?" Diana's timid voice asked. Someone snatched the phone out of Patton's hands before he could respond. He looked up at Ares, who glared at Patton and ended the call. Ares turned to his security guards. "I want all these fuckers out of my building," he rasped. One of the guards gestured to Patton and Remy. "What about those 2? "All of them," Ares snapped. "Including those 2. Janus scrambled to his feet. "Ares, don't. Pushing us away isn't going to help anyone, least of all you." Ares whirled around to face Janus. "I said, out." Patton yelped when 2 guards grabbed his shoulders. "Hey, wait!" He didn't want to be thrown out now, not when his brother was clearly struggling with something. Patton wanted to help. Janus struggled against the 2 guards that grabbed him. "Let me go! Ares, please!" Ares didn't respond and just glared. The lights started flashing again, probably Andy trying to bargain with Ares via Morse code, but Ares ignored it. Patton wriggled, trying to get away from the guards dragging him to the door. "Ares!" he called. The last he saw of his brother was a piercing, fiery glare before he was carried out of the room. Patton kept fighting against the guard's grip, even as he and the others were carried to the elevator. Both Remy and DW weren't struggling, which was probably the smart thing to do, but Patton couldn't just leave. He still had to fix things. That was the whole reason he came here. If he was forced out now, everything would stay the exact same it had been before. Wrath tracking Patton down to get revenge on him for killing their old leader. If Patton didn't try to fix it now, the problem would never get resolved. Before Patton knew it, he was being dragged through the lobby and tossed out the door. His breath left his lungs in a sharp oof as he landed on the sidewalk. Remy and Price were thrown to the ground after him. Janus and DW were pushed out with a little more gentleness than the rest of them, but DW still stumbled over her feet. The doors slammed shut behind them. Patton remained on the ground for a moment to let himself catch his breath. A gloved hand extended itself to Patton. He reluctantly took it and let Janus haul him to his feet. As soon as he was upright, Janus stepped forward so they were face to face. "You're a despicable and dangerous man," Janus spat. "If not for your children, I would have left you in there to rot. Be grateful." He whirled around and started down the sidewalk, DW at his side. Patton darted forward to stop him. "Wait, can you at least tell me?" Janus shot a glare at him. "Don't. I owe you nothing, least of all any information about the brother you abandoned. You cashed in your favor. I took care of your children. That's it. I will take you to the bank to pick them up, and then I want you out of my sight." Patton stepped forward, and another wave of guilt washed over him when DW automatically stepped backward, eyeing him nervously. Patton hated that just the sight of him scared her. He looked DW dead in the eyes. "I'm sorry," he said to her, even though he was also talking to Janus. "I didn't want things to end up this way. I thought I could fix things, but I just made them worse. I'm sorry." DW didn't respond. Janus simply raised an eyebrow. Janus motioned to the car with his head. "Get in the car, Prometheus." He glanced at Remy and Price. "You two can come with on your bike, but I want you both gone as soon as Poison Dart has his kids back." With that, he turned and strode to the car, with DW right beside him. Chapter 56. I guess this is it. The ride back to Chimera Bank was tense, to say the least. Patton sat in the back seat, hugging his backpack to his chest. He'd taken off his belt of weapons, which only seemed to calm DW's nerves a little bit. DW had sat herself in the driver's seat. Patton's presence made her twitchy and nervous, so Janus had offered to drive, but she insisted that driving would help her focus. Janus couldn't stop bouncing his leg and chewing on his glove through the entire drive. They were almost at the bank when Janus got a call. He reluctantly picked up and pressed the phone to his ear. "Hello?" "Finally," said Logan's voice. "I've been trying to reach you for the past 10 minutes. Something blocked me off from you. What happened?" "It's a long story, dearest. I'll tell you when we get home. We have to take the children there to pack up their things." "So Patton is all right, then?" "Physically, yes." Janus shot a glance at Patton in the rearview mirror. "He may have had a nervous breakdown, however, judging by the looks of him. Please tell Emil that he may need to remain in Clawmore for the rest of the day while I deal with this. Nico Flores can handle things over in Side Hill." "Will do. I'm eager to hear what you did in there. Wrath's Blade has taken down the bounty for Patton." Janus blinked in surprise at that. "Really? They've already taken down the bounty? Why on earth would they do that?" "I'm not sure. You must have been very convincing when speaking to Ares Justice." "I suppose you could say that. We're pulling up to the bank. I'll see you inside." "All right. See you then." "Goodbye, dear." Janus hung up and shoved his phone back in his pocket. "They took the bounty down?" DW asked. "Appears so," Janus whispered. "Haven't a clue why." DW parked the car. "Can you ask Justice?" Janus went to his messages to do just that, but he paused. "Huh. What?" "He's blocked my number." "What about your email?" Janus opened his email. "That too," he sighed. "It's not a big deal. Surely Logan can get me a way around that. But why would—" His voice trailed off when he spotted the last email Ares had sent him. It was not the one he'd sent before Janus had entered Wrath's headquarters without permission. This was one Janus hadn't read. "I'll figure things out on my own. Kindly fuck off. A Justice." "He says he'll figure things out alone," Janus said. He sighed. What an idiot. DW opened the car door as Remy and Price pulled up on Remy's bike and parked. "Patton," she said, her tone sharp and clipped. "Your kids are inside." Patton nodded and opened his door. Janus took a moment to sit in the car and take a deep breath. After everything that had happened over the past few days, he was probably going to need a week of downtime at home just to calm down. He stepped out of the car and followed DW to the bank doors. Patton trailed after them with Remy and Price at either side. Remy reached out and took Patton's hand as they walked. Everyone's eyes landed on the group as soon as they walked in the doors. Chimera agents stared in horror at Patton, despite the fact that he couldn't have looked less intimidating in his cat hoodie and crooked glasses. Janus held up a hand as he strode to the elevator. "He's not here to harm anyone. He will be picking up his children and leaving immediately." That didn't seem to get anyone to relax. Janus and DW led the other three to the elevator. The tense silence clung to them, even with a dozen other people in the room. Teal was among them, and while she appeared a little frightened, she didn't look at all surprised. The elevator ride down to the first floor felt like ages, although it was only a few seconds. He spotted Remy's red-headed bounty hunter friend texting someone on her phone. "Please tell me you're not contacting someone and telling them to come in," Janus said. "I would just love it if I had to deal with more problems today." Price tensed. "Oh, no, I'm not. I'm just asking a friend of mine if she can drive my car out here to Clawmore so I have a ride back." "Can you ask Andy what the fuck happened back there?" Remy asked quietly. "She says she'll tell us about it later," Price said. "She's coming here alone. Thomas is staying in Sidehill with that Flores dude." The elevator doors opened. Janus made a beeline for the meeting room, where he was sure everyone would be waiting, but he stopped in his tracks when he heard footsteps running down the hall towards him. He looked up to see Diana and Virgil sprinting down the corridor. They both skidded to a stop when they saw the group. Virgil stared at the five of them, and it took Janus a moment to realize just who he was staring at. The group parted to let Patton step forward. He and Virgil stared at each other like they couldn't believe the other was even real. Tears welled in Virgil's eyes. They ran towards each other as if a magnet had pulled them together. They both dropped their backpacks along the way. Both were already crying as they collided and wrapped each other in the tightest hug Janus had ever seen. Virgil sobbed freely, face buried in Patton's sweater. Janus imagined that his tears would leave some black marks in the fabric because of his makeup, but neither of them seemed to care. Patton held his son close and kissed the top of his head, muttering, "I'm sorry, and I love you, and I'm never leaving like that again." Janus turned to the meeting room and opened the door. Logan still sat at the table, laptop perched in front of them. Roman had busied himself with a notebook, while Remus had resorted to pacing back and forth, his sketchbook forgotten. They all looked up as Janus entered. "Roman, Remus," Janus said. He nodded to the hallway. "There's someone who wants to see you." They exchanged confused glances, but they abandoned their writing and pacing and circled the table to get to the door. Roman nearly burst into tears as soon as he reached the hallway. "Dad!" he cried. Patton looked up. His face split into a smile, despite the tears on his face. He and Virgil opened up their hug to let Roman join. He launched himself into their arms. Remus stared at the three of them, blinking furiously, his gaze 1,000 miles away. He shook his head and finally focused in on Patton. He gasped and rushed forward. He wriggled his way into the hug, earning a few teary laughs from his father and brothers. Janus couldn't help the smile that tugged at his lips. In the few days he'd been with these kids, he'd never seen any of them this happy. Someone walked up next to Janus and stood there, hands behind their back. Janus glanced to his side to see who it was. Diana stood there, gazing at the family reunion with sad eyes. She let out a sigh. "You're probably mad at me," she said to Janus. Janus raised a brow. "Mad? Why would I be mad?" "I shoved myself into this problem. I probably made things worse." Janus scoffed. "On the contrary, I believe you may have solved our problem. Patton is here, and the bounty on his head has been lifted. It seems as though his brother has given up on trying to force him into a role he doesn't want." Diana relaxed a little, but her sad expression didn't falter. "This is why I wanted to find my family," she whispered. "I never had something like this." Janus didn't exactly have a response to that. It was true that Demeter Justice had never been an affectionate person. Janus couldn't imagine the woman even smiling at her daughter, much less giving her a tearful hug like this. Ares, however... Janus shook the thought from his mind. No use thinking about possibilities at the moment. "This problem may be more or less solved, but yours isn't," Janus said. "Your girlfriend will remain in our infirmary, and you can stay with DW and I until she's awake and well enough to leave." Diana nodded. "Thanks." "It's no problem, Miss Short." Logan stepped out of the staff room, laptop tucked under his arm, and stopped next to Janus. "How did it go?" he asked quietly, so as to not interrupt the heartfelt reunion happening in the hall. Janus heaved an exhausted sigh. "You would not believe me if I told you." Logan laced his fingers with Janus's. "You don't have to tell me if you don't want to." "I will. Later. It's not guaranteed that I won't have a full-on meltdown the second we get home, however." Logan pressed a brief kiss to Janus's cheek. "That's okay. You should take a few days for yourself to cool down." "I might. I'm sure Moggy and your sister can handle the bank while I'm gone." Logan nodded. He squeezed Janus's hand, and then let go and stepped forward. He hesitated, then awkwardly pat Patton's shoulder. "It's good to see you're not dead, by the way." Patton looked up. His expression morphed from one of pure relieved joy to one of sheepish concern. "Oh, hi, Logan. I'm sorry you had to find out about everything like this. I just didn't know when—" "It's all right," Logan reassured him. "Now, I hate to interrupt this moment, but I believe we should go pack up your kids' things and get all of you home." Janus caught the brief sadness that flashed across the kids' faces before the three of them gently untangled themselves from their father's arms. Were they perhaps disappointed to be leaving Janus and DW? No, it had to be Janus's imagination. When they got back to Janus's place, the kids scurried around upstairs, gathering up their things so they could return home. Patton had gone with them, obviously reluctant to let them out of his sight, and none of them had protested. Remy accompanied him as well. It seemed something had transpired between the two of them back in Rathspace that made them nearly inseparable. As for Price Princeton, she stood on the porch and waited for her so-called friend to arrive with her car so they could leave. She kept fidgeting with the golden necklace at her throat and glancing down at her phone. This friend of hers must have been quite important for her to be so impatient. Meanwhile, Janus had gone directly to the kitchen. Making food always helped him calm down, so he just started baking whatever recipe had popped up in his recipe box first. He was pretty sure it was for iced cookies, but he was hardly paying attention. As he mixed ingredients, he explained to Logan everything, and that meant everything, about Patton and his past with Rathsblade, how Patton had grown up in Rath with Ares for a brother, been raised to be an assassin, shot his own father, and went on the run. DW and Diana were in the room as well, but Janus was mostly talking to Logan. He deserved to know things. By the end of Janus's explanation, he'd made one batch of cookies and was currently working on the second. Logan leaned against the counter with a cup of coffee in his hands, staring at Janus in shock. "I was wondering why he never disclosed anything about his family to me," Logan muttered. "The poison dart thing was obvious once you said it, but this came out of nowhere." "You probably would have known had you met Ares Justice," Janus said, mixing up a bowl of icing for a second batch of cookies. "The two look very similar. Not quite as much as Patton and his sister, but you can still see the resemblance." He peered down at his icing. "Dorothy, do we still have food coloring?" "Should be in the cupboard behind you," DW said through a mouthful of cookie. "Thank you." Janus turned and opened the cupboard. "Anyway, it wasn't really a shock when I found out. I figured it out almost as soon as I met Patton. He and his brother sounded a lot more similar back then, before Ares' condition got worse." "What's wrong with him?" Diana asked as she turned a cookie over in her hands. "I mean, that coughing fit didn't sound pleasant." She'd hardly taken a bite of her cookie. It was nearly reduced to crumbles due to all her fidgeting. "He has a lung condition," Janus said. He put a few drops of red and blue food coloring in the icing. "Cannot for the life of me remember which one, but it's some form of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. The bastard doesn't take care of himself, so I have to do it for him half the time. It's partially why I don't want to cut ties with Rath. The idiot needs support." Logan raised a brow. "I thought you said the two of you were enemies. Nothing more, nothing less." He raised his mug of coffee to his lips. Enemies with benefits," Janus said. Logan choked on his coffee. He coughed a couple times and lowered his mug. "That implies something very different than what you think it might imply." "What does it imply?" Logan couldn't seem to hold back a grin. He shook his head and chuckled. "Just say friendly enemies." "Frenemies," DW added. Janus nodded. "Yes, frenemies. That's what we are." Someone knocked on the kitchen door. It opened and someone stuck their head inside. "Sorry to bother you," Price Princeton said, "but my ride is here, and the kids are ready to go too, so we're all gonna head out. Patton said you might want to know." Janus set down the bowl of icing and wiped his hands on a towel. "Thank you. I'll be right out." Price ducked out of the doorway. Janus tugged his gloves back on and followed, grabbing his suit jacket off the counter and draping it over his arm. The other three went after him as well. Standing in the living room were Remy, Patton, and his three kids. The twins clung to Patton like they were afraid to ever let him go. Virgil stood with them, backpack over his shoulder. Remy leaned against the door, waiting, and next to him stood a short woman with brown skin and black hair cut into floppy emo bangs similar to Virgil's. Her form was half buried in an oversized black sweater. She twirled a set of car keys on her fingers. She spotted the group and gave them a smirk.
Hey, Logic.
Logan blinked. Hello. Your anxiety, I believe?
Yippers.
She tossed the keys in the air and caught them in one hand.
You still owe me a couple favors, remember?
Logan gave a sharp nod. Yes, I remember. You may call me if you ever need assistance, and I will do what I can. You have my number. She grinned.
I'll keep that in mind. We'll drive Pat and the kids home before we run back to Side Hill. Come on, Princey.
She strolled out the door and left it open behind her. Price followed after her without so much as another glance at Janus and DW. Janus turned to Patton, Remy, and the kids. Well, it's been a delight having you in the house, he said to the kids. I would say I'm glad to see you going home, but that wouldn't be true. Virgil glanced back and forth between Patton and Janus. He lowered his gaze and gave Janus a two-fingered salute.
It's been fun, Chimera.
Roman and Remus exchanged a look that Janus couldn't quite decipher. They both let go of Patton and rushed over to Janus. He stumbled back as they both tackled him in a hug. He raised a brow at Logan, who smiled and gestured at the twins, silently telling him to hug them back. Janus awkwardly patted Roman and Remus on the back. He had to admit he would miss having the kids in his house. The place had seemed much less empty as of late with them around. The twins let go of him. Roman darted over to DW and hugged her next, earning a surprised laugh from her. Remus took a step back. Scratching the back of his neck, he averted his gaze as if he thought he would be expected to give her a hug too. DW gave Roman a brief squeeze and then stepped back. See ya, kiddos, she said. Remus nervously fidgeted with his sleeves. He looked like he was debating with himself for a moment, before he took a step towards her and held up a hand for a high five. DW smiled and gently hid his palm with hers. I'm gonna miss you. Roman and Remus retreated back to Patton's side. Diana waved at them. I'll visit you guys the next time I'm in the neighborhood. Me too, Logan said. We never got much studying done, so I believe a few extra tutoring sessions are in order. Roman and Remus both groaned in frustration at that. Virgil cracked a smile and ruffled their hair.
It's not so bad.
He nodded to the door.
Why don't you two go out to the car? I gotta ask Jan something.
Roman and Remus waved at Janus and DW one last time before they scurried out the door. Virgil turned to Janus, gripping the straps of his backpack tight.
Would it be possible to get Dr. Picani's phone number? He asked quietly. If he still does normal therapist stuff, I mean. If that's possible.
Janus nodded once. I'll get him to contact you. He has his own office in Side Hill. I'm sure he'll be delighted to speak to you again.
Thanks. Virgil let out a breath. Well, bye. Thanks for letting us stay.
Virgil was out the door before Janus could even respond. Remy started after him. Pat, you coming? Patton nodded, but his gaze never left Janus. Yeah, I'll be right out. After Remy left the room, Patton took a deep breath and walked towards Janus. Out of the corner of his eye, Janus saw DW tense up and shuffle closer to Janus. It was hard to tell whether she was planning on jumping in front of him to protect him or ducking behind him to hide. Janus wouldn't stop her if she did either one. Patton stopped in front of Janus. Thinking back on the last time they'd been in each other's close vicinity 10 years ago, Janus half expected him to push Janus or punch him or start a fight. He was beyond relieved when Patton simply held out a hand. Thank you, Patton said. I appreciate you taking care of my kids. Janus was tempted to refuse the gesture and turn away. It was hard to ignore everything Patton had done to hurt the ones around him, including Ares Justice. However, Janus may be a petty bitch, but he wasn't that petty. He shook Patton's hand once and let it go almost immediately. You're welcome. Patton shuffled back to give DW some space. He hefted his backpack. With one last timid smile and a wave, he turned and left the house. DW relaxed as soon as the door shut. Oh my God, she breathed. I'm gonna go for a swim. I have to calm down. I'll be up in my room, Diana said, as DW made her way to the dining room to go upstairs. Once the two of them left, Logan took Janus's hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. Are you all right, dearest? Janus thought about it. A heavy weight seemed to have settled itself in his chest, and it took him a moment to realize that he was sad. He was sad to see the kids go. I'm fine, he said, with a smile that would hopefully make Logan think he was telling the truth. He turned and walked back to the kitchen. As he started mixing up his second batch of cookies, he tried to ignore just how much quieter the house was now. Chapter 57. Loose Ends. 1 week later. Patton looked up from his coffee when the doorbell rang. "Hang on," he called as he struggled to his feet. It was harder than usual to stand, since he currently had Roman clinging to his back, but he managed. He wasn't just going to tell Roman to let go. What kind of dad would he be if he just didn't take his kids for piggyback rides around the house? Virgil glanced up from his seat on the couch as Patton left the room. He tensed a little at the sound of the doorbell, but Patton couldn't help but notice that he relaxed much quicker than usual. Virgil may have still been a bit of an anxious mess, but he seemed to be getting steadily better. Patton opened the door. "Hi, Remy." Remy lowered his glasses with a smirk. "Hey, babe." He stepped into the house and shut the door behind him. He spotted Roman and reached out to ruffle his hair. "Sup, kid? Where's your little partner in crime?" Roman giggled and batted his hand away. "Doing a puzzle in the living room. You want to come help us with it?" Patton asked. "Actually, babe, I need to talk to you. Preferably alone." Roman's face fell. "Aww." He slid off Patton's back and landed on the floor. He hurried back to the living room and flopped down on the floor to help Remus with the puzzle they were in the middle of completing. Patton turned back to Remy. "What did you want to talk to me about?" Remy raised a brow. "Have you told your kids yet?" he asked, keeping his voice quiet. Patton sighed. "Not yet." "Why not?" "It's just, they haven't had a lot of good parents. I don't know how they would feel about, another potential dad figure." Remy reached out and took Patton's hand. "Hun, I'm already in their lives. I don't think changing the label of what we are is gonna mean much to them." "But what if it does?" "Then we'll all talk about it. Has the nerd been in today?" Patton nodded. "They finished studying about 2 hours ago." "Babe, we said we'd tell them today, and now seems like a good time. Besides, we've got that reservation at that one fancy restaurant tonight. We're gonna have to tell them before then." Patton sighed in defeat. "Yeah, you have a point." Remy grinned. "We can tell them now." "Wait, Remy!" Before he could protest, Remy took his hand and pulled him into the living room. "Hey, kids, we got something to tell you," Remy called. All 3 boys looked up. "What?" Remus asked. Remy nudged Patton in the side. "You want to tell them, or should I?" Patton shot Remy a glare. Taking a deep breath, he turned to look at the kids. "Remy and I have a date tonight." Roman gasped. "You two are together?" Virgil bolted upright on the couch. "When did it happen?" Patton blinked. "What?" Remus shot to his feet and grabbed Patton's sleeve. "When did you decide to get together? Give us details, old man!" Patton was a little surprised at that reaction, but he shrugged. "About a week ago, I think." "Just before we got back," Remy added. Roman raised his hands in the air triumphantly. "Ha! I won the bet! Take that, emo!" Virgil and Remus groaned simultaneously. "Damn it!" Remus cursed. He let go of Patton and scurried off to his room. "I'll get my rat skull." Patton stared at his 3 children as the realization dawned on him. "You 3 had a betting pool about when the 2 of us would get together?" Roman pointed to Virgil. "He thought you'd be engaged by the time you got back." Remy, who had been taking a sip of the Starbucks he had in his hand, nearly choked on his coffee. "Engaged?" he managed. Virgil shrugged. "Do you blame me? I mean, you 2 are so gay for each other that even I could see it. Dad, by the way, when you do get married, I call dibs on being your best man." "I want to be the flower boy," Roman piped up. "No fair! I want to be the flower boy," Remus protested, entering the room again with what looked like a rat skull and a shiny rock in his hands. Remy coughed into his fist, still choking on his coffee. Patton felt his face heat up. It's a little early to be thinking about that, kiddos." "I've been working on a best man speech for 6 months," Virgil said. "Literally everyone else has been thinking about it for years. Mr. Minder was actually convinced you would be married by the end of the year." "We asked him if he wanted in on the betting pool," Roman said. "He said no." Patton stared at them, dumbfounded. He looked at Remy. "Were we that obvious?" "Apparently," Remy coughed. He gently nudged Patton in the side. I told you. You were worried for nothing, hon. I guess so. Patton linked his arms with Remy's. So, do you kiddos want me to call Logan to babysit you? Or do you think you'll be okay on your own? Virgil, Roman, and Remus all glanced at each other. Patton couldn't decipher the looks on their faces, but he had a feeling he knew what they were thinking. We'll be fine, Virgil said. I'll call him if we have a problem. What time were you leaving? About 5:30. We'll be back around 8. Are you sure you'll be okay for a couple hours? Yep. All right. Patton tugged Remy towards the kitchen. I'm gonna make some cookies, so you guys have something for dessert tonight. I'll leave some money on the counter in case you want to order pizza. Virgil flopped back onto the couch and picked up his phone. You got it, Popstar. As Patton began bustling about the kitchen, Remy leaned against the counter and swished his iced coffee in its cup. You sure they're gonna be okay? He whispered. This is their first night alone without you since, last week. Are you sure they're not gonna panic as soon as we leave? Patton turned his gaze to his kiddos over the counter. Roman and Remus had scooted across the floor to sit near Virgil, their puzzle forgotten. The three of them muttered to each other in hushed tones. Roman glanced at Patton, then looked away as soon as he noticed him looking. I feel like they're going to be fine, Patton said. He leaned over the counter. Hey, kiddos. They all looked up. Make sure that if you go anywhere tonight, Patton said, you just leave me a note letting me know where you went. Or you can text me if you want. Virgil gave him a thumbs up to show he understood. Patton retreated from the counter and turned back to his baking. The rest of the day went on as usual. Roman had resorted to watching a Disney movie as he played with some of his toys on the floor, which included a doll with purple hair and a shiny cloak that Virgil gave him after a few minutes of lazing on the couch. Patton concluded that it was probably from the betting pool the kids had made, the little rascals. Remus had completely forgotten about the puzzle on the floor and started drawing in his sketchbook instead. Remy joined Virgil on the couch while Patton baked. A smile stretched across his face. He was so incredibly glad to be back with his kiddos. He wouldn't trade this for the world. It came time for Patton and Remy to leave before Patton knew it. He had just finished baking some brownies when Virgil was suddenly telling him to go get dressed in something fancy for his date. Remy's eyes had grown wide, and he'd scurried off back to his apartment to get ready. Roman insisted on helping Patton pick out an outfit, and although Patton had been hesitant at first, Roman had a surprisingly good sense of style for an 11-year-old. By the time Remy had rolled up on his motorcycle, Patton had put on a nice blue button-up shirt and some dress pants he forgot he had until Roman found them in his closet. As soon as he stepped out of his room, he heard the snap of a camera. He spotted Virgil leaning over the back of the couch, phone in hand. "Virg," he said. "What? It's your first date. I want to commemorate it." Remus opened the door as soon as Remy stepped onto the porch. "Sup, bitch?" "Watch your language, kiddo," Patton said, tugging at the heart-shaped necklace around his neck. Remy straightened his leather jacket, because of course he was still wearing his leather jacket and sunglasses for a date. What else would he wear? Over his white dress shirt. "Ready to go, babe?" "Wait." Virgil hopped off the couch and held up his phone. "We gotta get a picture of you two together." Patton snorted as Virgil scrambled to the entrance. For all the fuss the three of them were making about this, he would have thought he was a teenager going to prom. He stood next to Remy and linked their arms. Remy rolled his eyes behind his sunglasses, but he was smirking. He and Patton smiled as Virgil took a couple pictures. Virgil lowered his phone. "We're showing these pictures at your wedding." Roman walked up to the pair and gave Patton a quick hug. "Have fun!" Patton squeezed him back. "We will." "And be careful," Remus added. "Don't drink too much. And if you're not back by 8:30, I'm calling the cops." Patton pulled Remus into a brief hug. "I wasn't aware I had a curfew." "Well, you do," Virgil said. He pocketed his phone. "You have him back by then, mister," he said to Remy. "Any later, and he's grounded." Remy laughed. "I'll keep that in mind." He ruffled Virgil's hair. "See you kids in a few hours. You sure you don't need a babysitter?" "We'll find someone if we need one," Virgil said. "I've got a list of numbers to call in an emergency, including the pizza guy in case we start starving to death. We're gonna be fine." "We're just making sure, kiddo." Patton looked at Remy. "Ready?" Remy grinned. "Absolutely." He and Patton left the house as the kids shouted their goodbyes after them. The door swung shut as Remy led Patton to his motorcycle. "Are you sure they'll be okay?" Remy asked. Patton glanced back at the house. "I'm sure." He sat on the bike and shoved a helmet over his head. "So, where'd you make our dinner reservations again?" I don't care how many of his bones you need to break. Just make sure he gets us the money he owes. The employee in Janus's office nodded frantically. Okay, sorry for bothering you, sir. I just didn't... Whatever. Janus waved a gloved hand. Get out. The employee rushed out of the room. Before the door could swing shut, a hand reached out and blocked it. DW pushed it back open and stepped into the room. How's it going? She asked. Janus heaved an exhausted sigh and leaned back in his chair. The absolute incompetency, he muttered. It's astounding. DW hummed in response and walked around his desk to stand next to him. Need help? I am going to yell at someone one of these days, Janus sighed. I could yell at them for you if you want. I would actually love that. I'll call you next time I need to tell someone how stupid they are. Noted. DW leaned against the desk. Where's Elle? Taking Diana downstairs to visit Gemma again, he answered. She's been persistent with her visits over these past couple days. I would be too. Her girlfriend just woke up a few days ago. And by the way, if your nail polish is chipping, I can repaint your nails tomorrow morning, but you have to braid my hair in return. Deal. Janus leaned forward and rested his head in his hands. I know I said I'd take a few days off to relax, but you really should have, DW interrupted. I can handle the bank. I know. I'm just on edge. Ares hasn't contacted me since last week, and he glanced up at the pillow fort in the corner of the office that he still hadn't taken down. DW followed his gaze. Everything seems a lot more quiet, she said, as if she knew what he was thinking. And I shouldn't even be upset about it, Janus said. I love quiet. Why do I suddenly miss those loud little gremlins? Have you and Logan considered adoption? Dorothy, we're not even married. I don't even know what engagement ring I would want to get him, much less whether or not I want to legally adopt children with him. You guys are literally the textbook definition of taking it slow. How long has it been? Janus tugged on his gloves. Almost 10 years. Listen, we're both involved in crime, so we made an agreement not to get married until we were sure neither of us was going to die. Once we reach 10 years, we'll make it legally official if we want to. Until then, we're fine the way we are. DW rolled her eyes, but there was no real exasperation on her face. Whatever, man. I call dibs on being your maid of honor. I wouldn't choose anyone else. Someone knocked on the door. Janus prepared himself for another petty problem he didn't want to deal with. But when the door opened, it wasn't just a random agent who walked in. Speak of the devil, DW said as Logan stepped through the door. Logan straightened his glasses. Hello. I have some news that I think you may be happy to hear. Janus quirked an eyebrow. What is it? Logan stepped aside. Diana appeared in the doorway, beaming from ear to ear, and holding her hand was... Janus straightened. Ah, your girlfriend is up, I see. Gemma seemed hesitant, but she followed Diana into the room. Hi, mister, she said, her voice quiet. Dee Dee filled me in on what happened. We'll be out of your hair as soon as we can pack up our stuff. No need to leave immediately, he said. The two of you are free to remain with us until you can find another place to live. I don't want to overstay our welcome, Gemma said. You've hardly done so. I've only just properly met you. I assure you, it's no issue if you two wish to stay while you're finding somewhere to live. Thanks, Mr. Chimera, Diana said, for everything. Janus pretended to be busy with some papers on his desk. Yes, well, it's the least I could do. Don't think too much of it. DW checked her watch. Well, we can all head home if you want. It's getting late. Janus pushed himself to his feet. Sounds good to me. Logan fished the car keys out of his pocket. I'll start the car. He motioned Diana and her girlfriend to the door. Let's go. They left the office. Janus let out a tired breath. Why am I so goddamn tired? DW shrugged. Probably because you've been working yourself to death ever since those kids left. Do you think you can get empty nest syndrome after only having kids for 4 days? Janus shot her a withering glare, but there was no malice behind his eyes. He grabbed his briefcase off the floor and flicked open the latches. I've still got things to work on at home. Do you have all of your important files? DW held up her own briefcase. Yep. Good. Janus took the pile of documents he'd been sorting through earlier and tucked them into the case. I suppose we should get going then. Home still seemed so empty. It had really only been Janus and DW for a while, with only the occasional visit from Logan. Logan did visit more often, but he had his own jobs to get back to, so he wouldn't be staying tonight. Diana and Gemma were in their own little corner of the house, up in Diana's bedroom, so she could fill Gemma in on everything that had happened over the past week. Gemma seemed all too eager to hear it. That left Janus and DW more or less alone after Logan left. DW had resorted to eating ice cream out of a tub while curled up on the couch, watching some Netflix show Janus didn't particularly care about. He busied himself in the kitchen, unable to keep himself still for more than 2 minutes. Cooking would probably get his mind off things. He found that, no, cooking most certainly would not get his mind off things. Even as he got to work making spaghetti and garlic bread, his thoughts kept drifting to Ares, to the kids, to Patton Hart, and back to Ares again. He just wished there was some kind of magical answer to all of his problems. He set aside the bread roll he was currently cutting into eighths. Christ, he was tired. Maybe after dinner he would go to bed early. No, wait, it was his night to do the dishes. He'd have to do that first. I should have taken a week, he muttered to himself. But no, he just had to go and overwork himself because he didn't know what else to do. Logan had already been insisting that he take a break, but Janus just didn't listen. He was going to work himself into a full burnout one of these days. With a heavy sigh, Janus went to continue cutting the bread roll, but he flinched when the doorbell rang. He set down the knife. Who on earth would be at their door at this time? He left the kitchen, tugging his gloves back on. Dorothy, who is it? DW was busy trying to find the pause button on the remote. Not sure. Give me a second. I've got it. Janus dusted off his shirt to make sure there were no breadcrumbs on the fabric. He didn't quite know who this could be. There were a few Chimera agents that might have needed assistance. Perhaps it was Alex. They were always getting themselves into trouble. Janus opened the door. If it's an emergency, I can... His voice trailed off. He stared at the 3 people standing in his doorway. Hey, Chimera, Virgil said. We need a babysitter. Janus opened his mouth, then closed it, unsure of what to say. How did you get here? He blurted finally. Took an Uber. Figured it was safe enough to assume that the person driving wouldn't try and kidnap us. Virgil rocked back and forth on his heels, hands shoved in his pockets as Roman and Remus stared at Janus with their wide brown eyes. Anyway, Dad and Remy are on a date, and we need a babysitter for a couple hours. You free? Janus tried to say something, but what came out of his mouth instead was a surprised laugh. These kids traveled all the way across the city while their father was on a date, just to see if Janus and DW could babysit them. And they were standing here like it was no big deal at all. Goodness, they really did take after their father in the best ways. Janus opened the door and stepped aside, gesturing for the kids to enter. I hope you like garlic bread and spaghetti.
Sweet pasta,
Remus said, as he followed his brothers into the house. Janus couldn't help but smile as he heard DW's gasp of excitement upon seeing the kids, and the greetings exchanged between them. Even as he went back to the kitchen, he could hear the 3 kids talking amongst themselves and commenting on whatever it was that DW was watching. The house already felt much less empty. Diana was overjoyed. Even now, hours after Gemma had woken up, the excitement and relief still hadn't worn off. Diana had pulled Gemma up to her room and explained everything that happened last week. The stuff with Uncle Patton, her cousins, Janus Chimera, and her newfound Uncle Ares. Gemma was dumbfounded by the story, hanging on to every word like her life depended on it. Seeing the sparkle of amazement in Gemma's brown eyes made Diana want to just squish her cheeks and call her adorable and give her 1,000 kisses because Gemma was alive and awake, and that was all that mattered right now. That was pretty much what Diana ended up doing by the end of her long explanation, which led to Gemma giggling and half-heartedly trying to push Diana off. I get it, she squealed. I'm cute, I know. Gemma managed to plant a kiss on Diana's forehead. But you're cuter.
Impossible,
Diana said.
You're the cutest thing on the planet. Nothing is cuter than you.
Gemma giggled and crushed Diana in a tight hug. Oh my God, I can't believe you got caught up in all that, she said. I mean, both your uncles are world-renowned criminals?
Yeah, guess it runs in the family.
There was that word again. Family. Something Diana had never really known. Sure, she had her parents, but her father was constantly away on business trips, and her mother was distant and cold. Neither of them even knew Diana was dating Gemma. They didn't even know she liked girls. The mood was suddenly a lot more sour than it had been a second ago. Gemma seemed to sense the shift. She scooted closer to Diana on the bed and held her tighter. You okay? Diana managed a slight smile.
Yeah, I'm okay, because you're awake.
Gemma hummed. Thinking about your parents again? Diana sighed in defeat.
Yeah.
We could always stay with my folks, Gemma offered.
I don't want to bother them,
Diana said. They said we're always allowed in their house. It wouldn't be a bother.
Yeah, but I feel like I would be,
Diana admitted. Gemma gave her another squeeze. It's okay. We'll figure something out. It was then that Diana's phone buzzed. She gently untangled herself from Gemma's arms and dug it out of her dress pocket. A wave of confusion washed over her when she looked at the screen. Come outside. Diana furrowed her brow. It was a text from a number she recognized, but she couldn't quite remember where she'd seen it before. She must have called it at least once, probably. She stood.
Hang on, I'll be right back.
Gemma looked mildly concerned, but she let Diana go. Diana left the bedroom and strode to the balcony doors. She pushed them open and stepped out, searching the street in front of the house for whoever might have sent her this message. An orange car was parked across the street. She looked from the orange car to the little orange heart tacked onto the end of the message. She blinked, a little confused. She examined the number again and racked her brain to remember who the hell it might belong to. Then it clicked. A gasp left her lips. She covered her mouth with one hand. It couldn't be, and yet it was the only explanation that made sense. She rushed back into the house and threw open the bedroom door.
Pack up your stuff,
she told Gemma with a smile. When she and Gemma ran down the stairs, suitcases in hand, they saw Virgil, Roman, and Remus lounging on the couch, watching some show on Netflix. Janus Chimera and DW stood at the window, staring skeptically at the vehicle outside. They were both eating garlic bread, but Diana paid no mind to that. Is that him, or one of his grunts? DW asked Janus. I believe it's him, Janus said back. What he's doing here, I have no idea. They both seemed to notice Diana and Gemma at the same time. They turned to look at the girls in their suitcases. Where are you off to? Janus asked. Diana just smiled.
Thanks for letting me stay.
She glanced at the boys.
I'll talk to you guys when I get home,
she called. And didn't saying that feel great? Home. Every time she said that word before now, she only used it to mean the place she slept and ate and existed. But now she had family there too. She had Gemma, and now she would have someone else. She and Gemma left the house and made their way down the driveway towards the orange car. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. One that had the same color hair as Patton, the same freckles as Mom had on her cheeks, and the same necklace Diana had around her throat. He waved at the girls, and Diana already knew that this was where she'd find her home. She hopped into the passenger seat, and Gemma sat in the back with their suitcases. The man sat back down in the driver's seat and shut his door. Ready to go home? Ares Justice asked in his hoarse voice. Diana smiled.
Absolutely.
Thank you all so much for listening. This project has been a beast to get over the finish line, but it has been a blast, and I want to thank everyone who commented as we went along. You guys really helped me keep my momentum. Now that When the Chips Are Down is done, I'm going to be taking a little break from posting weekly content for at least a few months while I work on some projects in the background. But before I go on break, I'm going to have a live stream where you guys can come chat with me, ask me questions, and give me suggestions for the direction this channel will take in the future. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss that. But until then, thank you all for your support, and I'll see you next time.